Let's continue with our reaction. Bring in now the Police and Prison Civil Rights Union. The spokesperson there is Richard Mamabolo, who is going to speak to us in just a few moments. They, of course, had raised a number of concerns around coherency, especially within the security cluster, this feeling almost that we're pulling in different directions when it comes to ensuring that the country is able to have a coordinated response to any kind of threat. In fact, one remembers that inquiry that was done in the wake of the July unrest, speaking exactly about that fragmentation, the sense that the one hand isn't really aware of what the other is doing. There's also been a real concern around the running of the country's prisons. We know taking up that portfolio, interestingly enough, is Dr. POPCRU, who's part of the FF+, and he is going to be deputized by Lindiwe Nchali from the ANC. So there's a lot of anticipation, I suppose, to get a sense of what they will be prioritizing. We know the country's prisons had been saddled with a lot of capacity issues. This concept that we don't have enough capacity essentially to respond to criminality in our country, but also real questions around whether or not we're doing enough to rehabilitate some inmates in South Africa's prisons, given the fact that there are so many people who are re-offenders once they're released. And this is through a variety of crimes, whether it's cash and transit heists or, sadly, crimes related to gender-based violence and violence against children. So there's going to be a lot of anticipation to see how that all unfolds. But let's bring in POPCRU then. As I mentioned, Richard Mamabolo speaks for that organization and joins us now live. Richard, lovely to have you on the SABC. Let me get your first take. It's a big cabinet. Are you happy with what you see?
Good morning to you and the viewers. Look, of course, through this so-called government of national unity, you had to then be inclusive. But I think as far as it concerns the criminal justice cluster, we are quite confident that, this is a new tenure which will bring about new ideas. And we're obviously willing to work with whoever has been appointed. We think that, for example, there have been challenges which we highlighted in our statement earlier on to say that we have had challenges within the SAPS, for example, which has never had a national commissioner that has served out his or her term of office in full. And the only one was George Fivers back in 1994. So we think there needs to be some form of stability therein. And of course, with the new appointment of a minister, we're hoping that they could work very well with the commissioners. Similarly, with the Department of Correctional Services, we are quite confident that the commissioner within the DCS has been actually working very well with the unions. And of course, it's got a clear plan around how to transform the DCS. So we're hopeful that through him working with the current Minister of Corrections, they will be able to have a cordial relationship, which will ensure that we do focus on the key mandate of the department, which is to rehabilitate.
Yeah, there's a lot of focus, of course, that needs to go into ensuring law enforcement can respond to the number of killings we've seen in the country. I mean, of course, over the past couple of months, we've spoken a lot about political killings because we're in an election cycle. But the country is really saddled with a proliferation of guns, gangs that are running rampant in a number of communities, and in some instances, police who are said to be working in cahoots with these criminals. Is this the team, do you reckon, to get to the bottom of some of those syndicates? I'm talking, of course, about Senzo Mchunu, who's now heading up police, Thembi Nkadibeng, justice and constitutional development, and as I mentioned, Dr. POPCRU, who's now the correctional services minister.
Yeah, look, we're not about personalities, really. I think one of the critical things that we have always made clear as POPCRU is that we need to have a synchronization of all these departments. We need to have a criminal justice cluster that works in unison. You know, for example, you've throughout the years had the Minister of Police releasing crime statistics, and it does not give us a broader picture about what needs to happen. So we need to have, for example, police obviously speaking about the numbers of arrests they've made. You need to, at the same time, have statistics around whether those people have been found guilty or not within the courts, and ultimately how many people are within our correctional facilities. Working in that regard, we think that it would actually create a better environment wherein you can actually have all these ministers accounting in unison, but also looking into how we can then determine the budget of the entire criminal justice cluster so that it suits all these three departments. Because with one working, with them currently working as individuals, it does not serve the greater purpose. So we will definitely be looking forward to engaging these new ministers, and of course, hopefully that they will then look into how they can work together.
Yeah. Training of police has also been a massive concern in the past, right? Especially when responding to volatile situations, all the way from crowd control to, example, responding to some kind of robbery. Because this cabinet is so big, there are real concerns that resources will obviously have to be culled from somewhere in order to finance this much larger wage bill. I'm sure as an organization, you're hoping that these cuts don't come from places like training, which is typically what happens for any organization that's in a financial squeeze.
Look, many of the challenges that we've been having within the SAPS has been due to budget cuts. I think as much as we have obviously had platforms where we engage with with the employer as labor, the reality of the matter is that you have instances wherein we agree on what needs to be done, and at the same time you have the Treasury actually cutting down on budgets. I think just last year we had cost containment measures that were put in place. We also had austerity measures as well, which have got an adverse impact on the public service in its entirety. So we think that the determination around that should be something which the Department of Finance really considers. But there have been underlying challenges within the SAPS. As you know, that the staff complement has declined in the last years, and of course, even though there are recruitments on a year-to-year basis,
right,
you also have about half of that number of members actually leaving the service. So it does not necessarily result in us increasing the capacity.
Sure.
So those are some of the things that we think would definitely need to be looked into.
I've got you. Richard Mamabolo, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. We appreciate your time on the SABC.